Hi, and welcome to Girls Lunch, your mealtime companion where we talk about food, gender, sexuality, and where everyone is welcome.
I am Nicole Hilton.
I am Julia Andreas.
And Julia, it is late July when we are recording this. We are well into the summertime. Summertime is perfect for grilling time. We Americans love the grill. And what do we love most to put on the grill?
Burgers.
Burgers, which is today's episode topic, hamburgers. So Julia, neither you or I eat beef, but one can still enjoy a non-beef burger. Do you have favorite burger toppings?
Yes.
If you are at a, burger bar, what are you putting on there?
Well, we gotta start with, the bedrock of a burger, the bun, right? Like, growing up, we always had those potato buns.
Oh, so good. The little Martin's potato rolls.
Yeah, Martin's potato rolls. And so gotta have those. Crucial. Gotta slightly toast them, either on, the grill or in a toaster or whatever. I like mayo, ketchup, and mustard on mine. I need to have a pickle, a little bit of onion, gotta have nice crispy lettuce. This is the only time I feel like iceberg lettuce really can shine in the crispiness of a burger, but I could go with romaine or a mixed greens or whatever, but gotta have a little bit of green in there. Tomato, did I already say pickles?
Yes.
Okay, we'll double the pickles.
Just put another one in there.
That's my basic burger, or tomato slice, if I haven't said that already. I lost track of
yes.
where I was in the burger. So double the pickles and double the tomato.
Okay.
It's a pretty basic burger, but I like all that stuff on a burger.
I think it's really funny that you say that that's really basic, but when I was a child, I would have burger, ketchup, bun. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, I guess, I feel like it's basic because around here, there are a lot of burger places because, obviously, Montana is a very beef-heavy, bison-heavy sort of area. And so, their burgers out here get a little wild. They've got, mushrooms and, caramelized onions, fried eggs, kimchi sometimes.
Ooh. Yeah, you did list very, conventional toppings, I guess would be the word.
Yeah. Out here, burgers can get a little whack.
Well, thankfully, I have grown from my humble beginnings. So nowadays, yeah, I usually have either a chicken or a turkey burger on buns. I also do pickles, also ketchup, also onions. If there's some green stuff around, lettuce or some leaves, then I'll put that on there. But I don't have to have it.
I really want a burger right now.
I know.
I haven't had dinner yet, and I'm already
no.
Delicious. I want a burger.
At some point while I was researching this, and because I'm a baby, I texted my dad, and I was like, Dad, can we have burgers when I come over for dinner? And he was like, okay. And he bought, because he's my dad, I think he just, bought, a pound of ground chicken and just, made a bunch of chicken burgers and grilled them and then just sent me obviously I didn't eat all of them because I was the only one eating chicken burgers. But then he just, sent all the leftovers home with me. So I had, chicken burgers for, 3 days straight afterward. Which
that sounds like your dad.
I think that did help satisfy my, burger craving.
You're I don't want any more burgers. I'm done.
I'm sated. I'm not at the point where I'm ugh, I could ever eat another one. But I'm I think I'm good. Although, who knows? Maybe by the end of this, I'll be what sounds really good right now?
It sounds good. A little burger. A little burger time.
Okay, so would you like to learn some history about burger?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Yeah.
We have to start with a disclaimer because we always have to start with a disclaimer, which is that I'm going to try to stick specifically to burgers, although there's obviously going to be a lot of overlap with other topics of grilling, fast food. One day I will do a fast food episode that may even be further fragmented out into a McDonald's episode. I don't know. I have such an interest in the history of fast food. It's fascinating to me.
It's fascinating. Ha ha ha.
Oh!
Ha ha ha.
He he he.
Ha ha. Sorry.
It's a good one. But I'll try to minimize the fast food history in here to save that for another episode. So, we will start with this book that I read called The Hamburger, A History by Josh Ozersky. The burger has we have a lot of feelings about the burger.
Yay, I love feelings about things. I love it when people have feelings.
This man's got hot and juicy opinions that he is not afraid to share. That's not exactly what this passage is, but throughout his book, he's just like, this is what this is. I accept no substitutions. I'm not taking questions.
I love that.
We do love that. So Julia, can you please read, I think this is just a good opener, for our episode from Josh's book.
Aye, aye, Captain. At the end of the day, nothing says America like a hamburger. But just what is the content of this beefy, juicy, bun-bound message? What do Americans think of when they think of the hamburger? A robust, succulent spheroid of fresh ground beef, the birthright of red-blooded citizens? Or a styrofoam-shrouded Big Mac, mass-produced to industrial specifications and served by wage slaves to an obese, brainwashed population? Is it a sizzling disk of goodness, served in a roadside restaurant dense with local lore, or the grim end product of a secret, sinister empire of tormented animals and unspeakable slaughtering practices? Is it cooking or commodity? An icon of freedom or the quintessence of conformity? Like any other symbol, what the burger represents depends on who you ask.
Snap, 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 snap.
Snap, 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 snap. God damn.
Yeah. This is a really fun book to read.
The line, a robust, succulent spheroid, almost took me out. There was some self-control there.
The number of times that this man says spheroid in this book is many. Yeah, so I mean, I think, we have a lot of associations with the hamburger here in American culture and even abroad, right? I would argue that the hamburger is one of America's most prominent exports, or our sort of national food. And so there are some things about that we are proud of. There's some things about that we are maybe not so proud of, or it also represents some, I mean, it's America, right? It's as complicated as our country itself. So
yeah, not to get already too into the into the theoretics of it. This kind of reminds me of the donut episode that I did, way back when, and it was kind of the same thing where the donut represented this American industrialization of a practice, but also what people hate or dislike about Americans, the greed and the gluttony and things like that. Anyway, not to jump the gun.
Yeah. Okay, podcast over. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Yeah. No, I think that's 100%. I did not put that together until you've said that, but I think, there's definitely, there's some Venn diagram overlap happening between those two. But before we get into all of that, we should define what is a hamburger. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the word hamburger can refer to, number 1, a patty of ground beef, sometimes called Hamburg steak, Salisbury steak, or Vienna steak. Number 2, a sandwich consisting of a patty of ground beef served within a split bread roll with various garnishes. And we're not even gonna get into is hamburger a sandwich? We do not have time for that. And then number 3, the ground beef itself, which is used as a base in many sauces, casseroles, terrines, and the like.
All right.
Hamburger can refer to the patty, the meat, or the sandwich.
I've never heard of Vienna steak. I've heard of Salisbury steak, and I've heard of Hamburg steak, because I think that's what they call it in Japan.
Yes, I think so. we will be talking about that. I have also never heard of Vienna steak. I feel like it's wild because I think of like Vienna sausages.
Yeah, yeah. The little tiny like cocktail sausage or whatever it's called.
Yeah. There's actually some overlap between the hamburger and the hot dog / sausage that we'll talk about shortly. We know, or we think, that the hamburger is named after the German city of Hamburg, probably, but like we don't really know why or like how. There's some speculation that like, you know, there's lots of German immigrants coming to the US around the time that the dish became really popular, and usually German immigrants came through the port city of Hamburg. So like maybe that's it. I don't know. As I will be discussing, there's a lot of we're not really sure, or people claiming things that like, is that really true about the history of the hamburger, that are like, you know, of debatable veracity and origin. Okay, so now that we know what a hamburger is, how long have we been putting this ground meat between buns or bread? I actually just watched this the other day. Max Miller has a tasting history about this, where he talks about a Roman hamburger that the Romans made around 1st century AD. It's a mincemeat patty, but it's blended with like crushed nuts, and it's got a lot of spices, and then it's cooked. It's definitely not eaten as a sandwich. It's eaten kind of more as like a patty.
A steak.
Yeah. I mean, we would look at that and be like, oh, we kind of know him.
Yeah, looks familiar.
Yeah. There's another appearance by Hannah Glass's Art of Cookery, Made Plain and Easy, from the 1600s, who I believe she also gave us one of our early recipes of pumpkin pie. She has a recipe for Hamburg sausage. It's clearly a sausage. It's like in, you know, an intestinal casing, but she recommends like putting it on bread. So it's like, okay, like I see sort of what's happening here. You know, it's called Hamburg. It's like ground meat. You put it on bread. So it's like, okay, I can kind of see the connection here. But the real like progenitor of the hamburger that we know and love today comes about in the 1800s, which is when we start making like what's actually called Hamburg steak. It's more like cube steak, if you know what that is, or like chopped beef.
Yeah.
Instead of like ground meat, because we don't get meat grinders for like, you know, private home use until like the 1850s. But it's more like a chopped beef that is mixed with like onions and gravy, like a Salisbury steak. You eat it with a fork, you eat it on a plate. It's definitely not like a burger in between two buns, but this is definitely like the kind of grandfather of our hamburger. Fanny Farmer has a recipe for Hamburg steak, by the way.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that, and then I saw that in the notes, and I was like, I'll just wait.
Yeah.
I'll just wait.
Something else that's worth mentioning about this period of time is beef was quite expensive. I mean, like, still today, beef is kind of expensive, but beef was very expensive back in the 1800s because cows need a lot of land. And if we're thinking just in terms of, you know, the East Coast is like the United States, we have not fully, like, you know, stolen native land yet and expanded all the way to the West. So pigs are way more common, or like pork is way more popular and affordable. But once we do steal all that native land and claim the Great Plains or the Midwest, we use it for cattle herding, right? So like cowboys. You know cowboys?
Cowboys. Cowpokes.
This is what they're doing.
They're raising cow.
They're raising cows and supervising them and driving them on from one place to another. And then, like, now that we have all this land for all these cows, beef becomes a lot cheaper. I guess another definitely, like, critical moment in the history of the hamburger, before it even becomes the hamburger, is Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. Are you familiar with this book?
No, but what a name.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is a book that, like, I had drilled into my mind from my AP US history classes in high school. So basically in 1906, I believe it is, this guy, Upton Sinclair, writes this book where he is basically like, I am going to expose these, like, terrible working conditions in the meat industry, and people are going to care about labor and unionize and everything. And instead, what everybody focuses on is like, oh my God, the place that our meat comes from is so gross, and the animals are like so mistreated, and like the meat industry is not to be trusted. So people like totally miss the memo about working conditions. Upton Sinclair famously said, quote, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident I hit it in the stomach."
That's a raw line. I love that.
It is. Yeah, so people kind of miss the point about working conditions, but as a result, they're like way skeptical of like meat, specifically like ground meat, right? I mean, we still have this today, right? Of like, oh, you don't know what's in there. You don't know where it comes
Pink
from.
slime or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was some element maybe of truth to that, you know, back in 1906. And that actually, in part, gets us the Food and Drug Administration. So, you know, all this is to say that the hamburger has a real uphill battle to win over the public's heart, right? The meat is, like, questionable. It also has this reputation of, like, being eaten mostly by, like, working class or factory workers at saloons and these, like, all-night lunch carts. And that leads to some kind of, like, pearl clutchy quotes, which I just really had a good laugh at. So, Julia, you want to read these for us?
Oh, you know I do. Quote number 1. Fraker's celebrated hamburger steak sandwiches are always on hand to replenish an empty stomach and fortify even Satan himself. Wow. Quote number 2. They love darkness whose deeds are evil is probably as good a reason as any why Hamburg steaks are cooked and eaten on the streets at night, begins an 1894 San Francisco Chronicle account of the street carts selling hamburger sandwiches. A popular demand for this luxury at 2 o'clock in the morning has added a strong flavor of onion to that delicious combination of odors which surprises and delights the stranger who visits the business portion of the city between twilight and dawn.
Yeah.
You know what that just sounds like to me? It sounds like the episode of SpongeBob where I don't remember who it is, who's like, who wants a hamburger at 3 a.m.? And then it cuts to Patrick, who's like, oh boy, 3 a.m. And like eats a Krabby Patty.
Yeah.
It's the same vibe.
Yeah, same energy. The like fortify even Satan himself is just, it really tickles me. Of like, these is the devil burgers.
The burgers are the devil's food.
So, you know, hamburgers have this real reputation of being like, you know, for ne'er-do-wells. So this is from an article from the Washington Post, which also discusses some of the major claimants to the title of inventor of the first hamburger. There's probably more, but I identified at least 4 kind of major claimants to this title of first burger. So, number 1, we have Hamburger Charlie in Seymour, Wisconsin. In 1885, at the county fair, a teenager named Charlie Negreen was selling meatballs, and he decided to smush one of those meatballs in between 2 slices of bread. Oh my God, we have the hamburger. What? This legend is so important to the small town of Seymour, Wisconsin, that they have nicknamed the town Home of the Hamburger. They host Burger Fest every year and have since 1989. And they also have the world's largest burger collection at the local museum.
What?
I guess I should say, not actual hamburgers.
Okay.
In the museum. That's true. I think they should specify that. But it's like a collection of like hamburger memorabilia.
Okay. I was like, how do you collect hamburgers? They're a perishable item.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I think they should look into some rebranding. But yeah, so they've got like your vintage McDonald's menus and I don't know, Bob's Big Boy, whatever's. So that's Hamburger Charlie. Also in 1885, same year, also at a county fair, but this time in Hamburg, New York. There are 2 brothers from Ohio named Frank and Charles Menches.
Are they childless? Are they a pair of childless brothers?
They might be. I don't remember. They have a nephew that I think is also there. But anyway, so these two brothers are selling ground beef sandwiches because they supposedly like, oh no, we don't have any pork. Well, we'll use beef instead. This story seems like highly suspect to me because these brothers also claim to have invented the ice cream cone. And I'm like, this just seems like they want to be important, you know?
Yeah.
Number 3, in 1904, this time we are at the World's Fair in St. Louis. Not the county fair, but the World's Fair at St. Louis in 1904.
Stepping it up.
We have a man from Texas named Fletcher Davis, who is selling hamburger sandwiches. This is one of the ones that the Washington Post has investigated and found, like, that this evidence is just, like, totally fabricated.
Oh, wow. Saucy.
Yeah. Finally, claim number 4 is we have Louis' Lunch in New Haven, Connecticut, which is still open today. In 1900, a customer came in asking for something he could eat on the go. So Louis gives him a bunch of steak trimmings on toast. At Louis' Lunch, which I said is still open today, they still cook burgers in these like vertical broiler ovens that were made in 1898. Can you imagine the grease coating on this cast iron?
Oh my God. Definitely. I remember watching something about this. Maybe it was a Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives episode or something. Maybe it was a Max Miller episode, but I remember watching something about this.
Actually, the way I got most of this information is from an episode of Unwrapped on Food Network, where they like go to Louis' Lunch and they interview some people there. Yeah. And they show you like, here are the broiler ovens, and it's just like, wow.
That's a well-seasoned
That's
broiler.
about as well-seasoned as you can get. Our buddy Josh, who wrote the hamburger history that we quoted from earlier, he feels very strongly like, no, this doesn't count. This is not a hamburger. It is on toast. It's not a bun. This is one of the things that he like feels very strongly like, this is not a hamburger.
Then what is it, Mr. Ozersky?
Good question. The family that still owns and runs Louis' Lunch, Louis' descendants, would argue very much so that this is the first real hamburger. And in the episode of Unwrapped that I was watching, they like interview, I think it's Louis' like great-grandson, who has this like strong New England accent, who is just like, you know, they're basically asking him like, well, how do you know it's the first hamburger? And he's just like, oh, well, we have a signed document that we have in a vault down at the bank. I don't feel like I need to go and get it. And his voice the whole time really just says like, if you keep pushing, I'm going to break your knees, you know? It's just like the attitude of like, you know, somebody from New England.
The New England-tude.
Yeah, the New England-tude is very much it. Like I said, most of these have either been like totally disproven or at least like dethroned as the like first hamburger by the Washington Post or other reporters. Mm-hmm. So the guy who wrote the article for the Washington Post found lots of historical newspaper articles discussing like hamburger sandwiches prior to like, you know, Louis' Lunch or Hamburger Charlie. I think it's probably one of those things that just like a lot of people having the same idea kind of around the same time rather than like there being one single inventor. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We're already making Hamburg steaks. I don't think it's a huge leap to be like, well, put it between some bread, you know?
Yeah, and I'm sure, like, you know, everyone probably had around them at the same time Hamburg steaks and dinner rolls.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you just put it there. You put it on the split roll. You're done. It's a hamburger.
Yeah, so I think that's probably what it is. So, okay, so let's talk. I know I said we're not going to talk too much about fast food. I promise. I did rein myself in. But we are going to talk about one of America's first chain restaurants, definitely its first fast food restaurant, which is White Castle. In 1916, in Wichita, Kansas, a young man named Walt Anderson is grilling tiny balls of beef on a steaming griddle next to onions, which if you have been to White Castle, this is like their signature flavor, right? Is this like very oniony burger flavor. Walt was apparently trying to make meatballs, but he was like, this is taking too long to cook. I'm just gonna smash it. And he puts them between a little bun and he creates the slider. So if you know White Castle, you know that it's not like, you know, your big giant thick burger, Whopper, these little guys.
This is good to know because I've never been to a White Castle.
I have also never been to a White Castle, but I have read so much about White Castle and all of my readings about the history of fast food. Everybody always starts at White Castle. Yeah, so White Castle makes sliders, which is just little guys, and they start selling, sliders. They have this saying of you could buy them by the sack for a nickel each. And people did, and people would go and buy, even nowadays, if you go to White Castle, because the burgers are so small, they usually get 4 or 5. This is only about 10 years out from Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, so people are still pretty skeptical about ground meat. And so Walt Anderson reassures his customers, no, don't worry, I'm using fresh meat, there's nothing weird in these burgers. He gets his own grinder, he very publicly grinds the meat, he has this
I love that
big old chunk of chuck that he throws in there and grinds it, and he's got they can see the kitchen, they can see that the kitchen is all super clean. All of his cooks have to wear white outfits. It's very much he's a little bit of a Fred Harvey,
I love me a public demonstration
of meat grinding.
I mean, they did the same thing for the tomato way back when, right? They were tomatoes are not poisonous, and one guy ate one in front of a bunch of people to prove it.
Dang. That's just a mini food fact of the day that you just slipped in
Sorry,
there.
that's just a mini food fact.
So this works pretty well for Walt Anderson. I think he opens up 4 or more hamburger stands. And on his 4th one, his landlord, who's named Billy Ingram, is I want to be your business partner. This is in 1921. Billy Ingram says, I want to be your business partner, which is good because Billy Ingram is a marketing king.
Oh boy.
They come up with the name White Castle to give this idea of cleanliness and stateliness, right? White Castle. Some of the other really wild marketing ploys that Billy Ingram comes up with are they hire a spokeswoman, Julia Joyce, not her real name, to sell burgers to housewives who they assume are going to be really skeptical of is this good for my family? Is this real meat,
Mm-hmm.
So they come up with this idea of hiring a spokeswoman sort of in the style of a Betty Crocker or an Aunt Sammy to convince wives that White Castle burgers are good for your family, they're nutritious. This lady, Julia Joyce, would come to women's club meetings and then take everybody to White Castle afterward, and they could go and look in the kitchen, and she'd be look at how clean it is. And then
wow,
everybody would leave with a bag of White Castle.
Parasocial relationships here.
100%. Yeah, this is early influencer culture,
Oh yeah.
And then the second, this one is bananas to me. Marketing ploy that Billy Ingram employs at White Castle to, again, convince people, no, you can eat White Castle all the time. It's totally fine. Nothing weird here. They commission a study, quote-unquote study, where they make a medical student eat nothing but White Castle sliders for 3 months.
Oh.
This med student eats nothing but White Castle sliders and water for 3 months straight.
Yee!
And Billy Ingram announces that this study was super successful. And please read the quote here that I have pulled about the study.
Okay. The student maintained good health throughout the 3-month period and was eating 20 to 24 hamburgers a day during the last few weeks. They got a food scientist to sign a report stating, a normal, healthy child could eat nothing but our hamburgers and water and fully develop all its physical and mental faculties.
Is that not the most batshit thing you've ever read?
That is very crazy. And this is very... This is what, the 1920s, right?
Yeah.
This is also the time of oh, really got to think about our bowel health.
Yeah.
And over here, this poor kid is made to eat 50 hamburgers a day or whatever. No wonder they got really into fiber in the 20s.
Yeah. So anyway, I think about that all the time. Imagine being that med student. Do you sign up for it like, oh, I love hamburgers. I don't, at what point are you like, oh God, I can't eat another one,
They're probably like, we're gonna buy all the hamburgers for you. You don't have to spend any money on food for 3 months. And he was like, oh, sounds good. I'm a med student.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Maybe they pitched it to him as like, how would you like to have free food for 3 months?
He was like, yeah, that sounds great. Oh, only hamburgers?
Yeah.
I already signed, so I guess I have to.
Okay, I guess.
Okay.
I also love the, like, report of, like, the idea is equally insane of, like, we could feed a healthy child nothing but White Castle hamburgers and water, and they would fully develop and be fine. We're going to talk about him briefly, but this is so different from what Morgan Spurlock does, like, almost 100 years later in Super Size Me, right?
Yes.
He does exactly this, and everyone is, he gets fat, everyone's repulsed, like, versus, like, these White Castle people are like, no, it's good, So, okay, we've convinced people that they like hamburgers, and we have sort of the more modern iteration of the hamburger, right? Beef patty grilled on a bun. After World War II, hamburgers just continue to get bigger, right? I feel like everything gets bigger after World War II because we have this, like, post-war abundance. The original hamburger, the White Castle slider, that's from a more, like, economically tight time. During World War II, there was meat rationing. We don't have that anymore, so we got to get wild, like, big old beefy burger boy. Let's celebrate this abundance. And beef also just generally gets cheaper, and the inflation that we were experiencing during World War II goes down. So generally things just get cheaper. So in my notes, I just like totally bypassed the drive-ins and diners, but they were important in helping popularize the hamburger as well. That's, the progenitor to fast food. So after World War II, we're having big burgers. We have big cars. Everybody's getting a car after World War II. Just like Oprah said, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. We love these big, beautiful Buicks and Cadillacs. We never want to get out. We never want to get out of our big, beautiful Buick. So drive-in restaurants become super popular because you don't have to leave your big, beautiful Buick. You do everything in your car. You can eat in your car. You can contribute to high rates of teen pregnancy in your car, which is what all the youths are doing at this point. Hamburgers are perfect for this because they're very handheld, right? You don't have to worry about like, oh, geez, I got a plate and a fork, and how am I going to do this with the wheel?
Oh, that's too cumbersome. You can't drive and eat with a fork.
Well, even at a drive-in, you're not necessarily driving, but like you don't have a table, so you want something a little more handheld. Until we get to the drive-thru or fast food. Like I said, or like you said, Julia, the hamburger is a handheld food, perfect for eating and driving, which is good because, like I said, we love our cars, we love driving, we have the interstate highway system, and our cities become very car-centric. Gotta have a car to get anywhere. I would argue that, and I think other people, critics and scholars and everybody have argued that the burger succeeds as fast food's food of choice because it is so simple and quick to make, right? Mm-hmm. This is not like something laborious with multiple steps. It's not a meatloaf or a casserole or whatever. It's really easy also to put on like an assembly line with low-skilled workers and therefore maximize your profit.
Ooh, we love profit.
Oh boy, we do. I mean, you're just grilling the meat and then you're putting it on a bun. And then somebody else is putting toppings on there. And that's it, right? You're not mixing anything. You're not like, it's got to cook for this long, and then it's got to cook for this long, and then you have to, it's very straightforward. So I would say that is why the burger, as opposed to, I don't know, whatever else food succeeds as like the fast food. At this point, like, it's sort of a given that we all love hamburgers at this point, which is very different than like years prior, right? We had to sort of convince people like, no, eat hamburger good.
It's safe and good.
Now we all know that hamburger is good, right? So now fast food restaurants or burger restaurants are having to convince people like, well, you should buy my burger, not like Mr. Stinky Burger over there across the street or whatever. I don't know.
That's going to be my new burger place, Mr. Stinky Burgers,
Burger.
located across the street.
So, like I said, at this point, like, burger restaurants are just sort of like, their goal is to differentiate from each other, right? Burger King's thing is they've got the flame grilled burgers instead of a griddle. You know, our burger's got special toppings, our burger is bigger, or it's got 2 patties, or whatever it is. I just had to include just one little McDonald's fun fact in here to just sort of capture how popular the hamburger becomes in really like less than 100 years, or just about 100 years. So McDonald's stopped counting how many burgers they had sold in 1994 when cumulative worldwide sales surpassed 100 billion.
Oh.
So if you ever remember driving past a McDonald's and it says like X number millions served, at this point they just say like billions and billions served because they have lost count.
Jeez.
There are lots of people on the internet, lots of math nerds, not me, who have tried to figure out how many burgers that McDonald's has sold. It's definitely in the like hundreds of billions for sure. I believe it is over 1 million a day at this point. People online were trying to speculate like, has McDonald's sold its trillionth burger yet? I don't think it has, but wild that we could even consider that, you know? That like one restaurant has possibly sold this many. Around the 1990s, we start to worry that maybe we shouldn't be selling and consuming billions of burgers. We start to worry, like, are we eating too much fast food? I don't want to talk about Super Size Me. We're not going to relitigate Super Size Me. Just go listen to the maintenance phase episode. It's better than anything I could ever come up with.
Yep.
But it's undeniable that Super Size Me has a major impact on how we start to think about fast food.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Julia, for someone who hasn't heard of Super Size Me, do you want to give the quick version?
Yeah, I can give a super quick version. There's this guy, Morgan Spurlock, and he's like, I'm going to do a documentary where I only eat McDonald's for a certain amount of time. I don't remember what the time frame is.
Is it like a year or like 6 months or something?
I think it's even shorter than that. 60 days, maybe? This was also the time, like Nicole said, where the hamburgers were getting bigger, bigger, bigger. And so there was this thing at McDonald's where you could order like a meal and they'd be like, oh, do you want to supersize that? Where you would get like a bigger drink or like a bigger fry. He was like, every time they ask me, do I want to supersize that? I have to say yes. Long story short, there is bad documentary practices here. The documentary has a purpose, and it is to villainize fast food.
Yeah, it's definitely also trading in like shock value.
Yes.
Morgan Spurlock gains a lot of weight, and the idea is he wants the viewer to be like grossed out.
Repulsed.
Yeah, repulsed, that's the word.
Repulsed by fast food and repulsed by people who eat fast food specifically. I'd say it's like a bad faith documentary. However, it is also like something that was shown throughout schools in health class. So essentially you're getting kind of like this shock value and this cue to be repulsed by this stuff at a very young age in the early 2000s.
And I think the hamburger, even though it's not necessarily the thing being supersized, I think the hamburger becomes the sort of like focus, or definitely sort of similar to the donut, becomes like the thing that we fixate on as like, you know, hamburgers are like overindulgent, it's full of fat, it's bad for your cholesterol. It's definitely one of those things like the donut that we think of as shorthand for like junk food or like food that is bad for you. I mean, we're also having some social, cultural criticisms about fast food at this point as well, and also some social anxieties, right? So, like, fast food has now become so commonplace that rather than being like, oh, this is a treat, or like, this is new and exciting, fast food has acquired a reputation as, like, it's cheap in quality and, like, literally price cheap, and therefore it becomes associated with, like, that's poor people food.
Mm-hmm.
Fast food is low class. It's, as we said at the opening, it's like industrialized. This is not food that's made with any kind of care. It's food that's made in assembly line. And that makes it like not real food, right? It's like overly processed. And we also have environmental concerns at this point as well. Climate change because of methane associated from cows. There's animal rights concerns about, like, maybe the cow that, turned into your burger, like, did not have the best life. That brings us roughly at breakneck pace up to, I would say, the present or future of hamburgers. I would argue, kind of like we did in the donut episode, like anything else, everything in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think that we have reached kind of a better place or relationship with the hamburger nowadays. I think it still has a reputation as like being kind of junk food, but there's also lots of different types of burgers now. We have like, steak burgers or smash burgers, which are like pride themselves on like, oh, high quality beef. There's lots of like local gourmet burger places like you were talking about, Julia. Get your mushroom Swiss burger, your jalapeno burger, or whatever.
Your kimchi fried egg burger.
And at this point, we can make a burger out of anything. Got your black bean burgers, chicken, turkey, bison burgers, plants. We have lab-grown meat, and we have plant-based meat like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, who I think are known for their burgers, right?
Yes.
I feel like that's the way that most people, at least originally encountered Beyond Meat or Impossible Foods, was the Beyond Burger, the Impossible Burger.
I remember specifically, and it's a decade ago now, which is pretty wild to think about, the beginnings of the Beyond Meat burger. And I remember, I think there was an article in the Washington Post, and there was also an article in Bon Appetit all about the Beyond Meat burger, because it was kind of the first of its kind. There was nothing like it before. Something that kind of looked like meat and tasted like meat that wasn't just black beans and corns in a very mushy patty. And 10 years later, it seems like, like every other restaurant's got like their Beyond Meat alternative. Like if you want a burger, you can just go there and get like the Beyond Meat burger. And that's really nice. For a long time, people were like, pearl clutching, like that's not a real burger, like that stuff will kill you or whatever. We're
gonna talk about Impossible Burgers later on as well, but I think for now that we have sort of caught up to the current hamburger moment, I would like to know a food fact of the day. Do you have it ready for us, Julia?
Oh, I have it ready.
Oh boy. Okay, let's go.
So, we like to grill burgers, but what else do we like to grill? Corn!
Ladies and gentlemen and non-binary friends at home, if you have never had grilled corn, let me bless you with this, okay?
Ooh, baby.
What you're gonna do, now that it is grilling season, you're gonna get some corn on the cob, you're gonna peel it somewhat down, but you're gonna leave some of the husk on it. You're gonna cut a little bit off the top and a little bit off the bottom of the ear. You're going to fill your sink with water. You're going to soak the corn for an hour or two. Then you're going to put that corn on your grill, and then when it comes off, it's going to taste like sweet, sweet candy.
This has been Nicole's Recipe Corner. It's like a podcast within a podcast.
I know, right?
I know. Now I want grilled corn. Anyway, there's lots of different varieties of corn, but Nicole, what is baby corn?
Baby corn is my favorite part of Chinese food.
Do you think that baby corn is corn?
Ooh. Yes? I think so. It's got to be a type of corn, huh?
Well, you're correct. Surprise, surprise, baby corn is just that. Immature corn cobs.
Oh.
It literally is just baby corn.
Wow.
Which is like, I didn't know that until today. So we're all learning things here. So to get baby corn, you kind of have to think about the sort of like pollination cycle of corn as a crop. As a corn stalk grows, they produce both male and female flowers. The female flowers are ears, essentially baby corn, and the male flowers are tassels that grow at the top of the corn plant. So baby corn, also known as cornlets, which I think is super cute, is the female flower, the immature ear of corn before it's pollinated by the male flower. That's all it is. It's just the little tiny corn before it gets pollinated and it matures into an ear of corn that we know today.
Wow.
pretty much any breed of corn can be baby corn, which leads us to ba-da-ba-ba-ba, it's a mini game.
Oh!
Welcome to Match That Corn.
Yay!
A mini game in which
That's the live studio audience cheering.
a mini game in which Nicole will have to match the type of corn with what it's used for.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to give you 4 types of corn, and then I'm going to give you 5 different uses for the corn. There's one extra one that's not actually a correct answer, just to make it hard for you.
Whoa.
So, in the corn variety section, you have A, flint corn, B, sweet corn, C, field corn, and D, dent corn. In the options of what they're used for, you have A, popcorn and grits, B, corn chips and tortillas, C, corn on the cob, D, corn for oils and sweeteners, livestock feed, and biofuel. That is one answer. And E, Nixa corn liquor and corn whiskey.
Okay. Okay, I do feel pretty confident that sweet corn is for corn on the cob.
Correct.
Then... Okay, and then field corn, I think, is corn for oils, sweeteners, livestock, and biofuel.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I'm gonna guess that flint corn is for corn chips and tortillas, and dent corn is for the corn liquor and corn whiskey. Oh, okay.
Both answers are incorrect.
Oh. Okay.
So, flint corn is for popcorn and grits. Dent corn is for corn chips and tortillas. And then Nixa corn liquor and corn whiskey, you can use any type of corn, doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha! And that was our exciting round of Match That Corn. Thank you for coming to my mini game. Back to the food fact. You might wonder why we don't have like fresh baby corn at the supermercado. Firstly, baby corn isn't grown really in the US at all. It is mostly grown in like Thailand and Taiwan and that sort of general area of Asia. And so baby corn is, well, a baby. It's very fragile and extremely perishable. The only way you can really get baby corn to customers in the US across the ocean is canned or jarred. Unless you're like have a really fancy farmer's market near you where they will provide to you baby corn. Second, growing and harvesting baby corn is like super laborious and hands-on process. You can't use a big machine to remove the tiny cobs from the stalk, so you have to do it by hand. And then you have to like shuck each tiny cob by hand too. So of course like American farmers aren't gonna do that because it's not like it's like a money suck. You don't really get any money from that.
Okay, but now so you're saying that like the tiny baby corn has its own little husk?
Yeah, it literally looks like someone
like doll corn.
Pointed a shrink ray. Yeah, pointed a shrink ray at an ear of corn and shrank it.
Wow, oh my god, that sounds so cute.
It is very cute. But Nicole, if you wanted baby corn, you could grow some at home. You just have to grow your regular sweet corn, let the first cobs that are on the stalk mature into full adults, and while they're maturing, harvest the second cobs for baby corn. For optimal flavor and texture, you should pick the baby corn no more than 3 days after the tiny husks have silks on them.
What a jam-packed food fact of the day this has been. We have a recipe, we have a game, and we have gardening tips, you know? You're not going to get this anywhere else, folks.
No, it's right here.
What is it called at McDonald's? The value menu?
The value menu?
Yeah, that's what this is right here. This is the value menu. It used to be the dollar menu, but I think they could no longer...
I think now it is the value menu.
Yeah, because not everything on there is $1 anymore.
Anyway, that was our food fact of the day, jam-packed with all of your favorite things. Thank you for letting me have my spotlight to talk about baby corn.
Amazing. You know what else is amazing, Julia? Feminism.
I was about to say feminist literature.
Yeah, feminist critical literature.
Well, Nicole, with that, should we get wiggy with it?
Let's get wiggy with it. We are going to talk today about a feminist critic named Carol J. Adams.
Oh, I know her.
Oh, you do? What do you know her from?
I have read one of her books.
Is it Protest Kitchen?
Yes, I have read Protest Kitchen. Yes.
So you know Carol J. Adams, but for the people at home, I'm going to read part of her biography from her website. Carol J. Adams is a feminist vegan advocate, activist, and independent scholar, and the author of numerous books, including her path-breaking The Sexual Politics of Meat, a Feminist-Vegetarian Critical Theory, which is now a Bloomsbury Revelations edition celebrating its 25th anniversary. I think it might actually be 35 years at this point. So, let's talk about The Sexual Politics of Meat, published in 1990, so next year will be 35 years. Full disclaimer, I did not read the whole thing. It was very long. It seems like it is a pretty central text that's, pretty important to this, section of, feminist literature, right? Like, feminism, veganism. Carol J. Adams has an agenda, right? And that's not, a bad thing, necessarily, but, I feel like we should acknowledge that she very much wants to persuade her readers to not eat meat and to become, vegetarian or vegan. And there is, as a result, some, shaming of meat eaters here. Maybe that's probably obvious for, a vegan feminist text, but I just wanted to say that because here at Girls Lunch, we do not shame whatever you want to eat. We never tell you what to eat. We don't shame you about your dietary choices. So if you do decide to read this book, just know that, that is an element of it. And that's also not to shame Carol Adams for, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to kind of lay all the cards on the table.
Yeah, we're just being transparent.
That's the word. I would say that the main thesis of The Sexual Politics of Meat is kind of located in the preface of the book. So, Julia, do you want to read that section for us?
This book details the interrelationships between feminism, health, and ethics, and examines the connections between male dominance and meat eating. It argues that to talk about eliminating meat is to talk about displacing one aspect of male control, and demonstrates the ways in which animals' oppression and women's oppression are linked together. My endeavor in this book is to make covert associations overt by explaining how our patriarchal culture authorizes the eating of animals, and in this to identify the cross-mapping between feminism and vegetarianism. I'm also remembering now that Carol J. Adams was also quoted in the feminist restaurant book.
Oh, that 100%
that I
tracks.
read for the restaurant ones. I'm like, this sounds awfully familiar.
Wait, did I read this before? So kind of like Julia just read in that thesis statement from the preface, basically her argument is that meat eating is strongly associated with things like masculinity, manliness, virility. Eating vegetables or being vegetarian or vegan is more feminine. It's kind of emasculating. Think about a dainty salad versus a, I don't know, hamburger. That's how we're, tying it back to our main topic today of hamburgers. So the Sexual Politics of Meat has a lot of discussions of myths, stories from the Bible. There's historical and political analysis, social and anthropological analysis. There's a lot in there of things that Carol is breaking down. Like she said, trying to make those covert associations overt of how do we think about meat? How do we think about feminism, masculinity? How do we think about the female body? All that type of stuff.
I think you can kind of trace this back through a bunch of our episodes. I'm thinking specifically about the restaurant episode where it was the cultural, societal understanding that women liked light, sweet, dainty foods. And that's what they were catered to with restaurants. In the 1880s, if you were a woman going to a restaurant, there's no way you'd get a Hamburg steak.
Right.
Right? That's not what they would serve you because that's savory. That's meaty, that's heavier. Instead, you would be getting, weird salads that were, mayonnaise and fruits and things, and, sweet, lighter things that you could eat more gracefully.
I feel like we still get that today to some degree. And heterosexual dating advice is what comes to my mind of like, what do you order on a first date?
Yeah.
Especially like, obviously for women, right? Men don't. Maybe men try to tell other men like what you should order on a first date to impress a lady, but in my mind, I feel like it's always like, hey ladies, here's what you should order on your first date so that you show the man that you are courting, or I guess I should say the man that is courting you, because women don't pursue sexual attraction, obviously. You know, that you don't want to be sloppy, you don't want to like eat too much, or like, you know what I mean? There are like certain associations with that type of stuff.
I mean, to push the stereotype further, like there's that classic joke of like, you go out to a restaurant and like the guy orders a burger, but the girl always orders a salad.
Yeah.
There's a line in Hilary Duff's A Cinderella Story where Cinderella and Prince Charming, I don't remember the actual characters' names, are like walking, and Prince Charming's trying to figure out who Cinderella is at his school, and he's like, would you rather have a salad or a Big Mac? And like Cinderella says, a Big Mac, and he's like, well, you just eliminated like 2/3 of the girls in our school. Just to kind of exemplify like this is something that is still very much like permeating through our culture today. Like
that's another way, like if we just want to keep pushing this, right, that we show like a I'm not like other girls TM, right, is like eating meat or like eating these, you know, heavier foods like burgers, like ribs, you know, like a steak or something.
Yeah, to go out on a first date and to choose something that is like actively a non-feminine food, like a salad, like to have a burger and fries, is weirdly a statement, even if that's just what you want.
Yeah, so that's the sexual politics of meat. There is also another book by Carol J. Adams published in 2018 that is just called Burger.
Bjerger.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, that's how Ryan and I say, like, this episode is probably the most I have said burger in the last, like, I don't know how many years. Because Ryan and I are always like, Borger.
Bjerger.
Exactly. I don't know why. This book, Burger, is from the Object Lessons series. This is like a series of little books. They're usually like 100 pages or so, produced by Bloomsbury. That is like taking an everyday object and examining it really closely. So in Burger, Carol Adams talks about, like I said, the various meanings, connotations of burgers, different types of burgers. There's a section called Citizen Burger, which is about how burgers are sort of like we've been talking about. It's the food of the common man or the common American. It's like a very American food and even like a patriotic food, I would say. She also has a chapter called Cow Burger, which is about slaughter of animals, animal rights, treatment. Something that I found really interesting was she mentions like how the way we talk about animals is different after they are dead, right? So like, if I say this burger is made of beef, I'm not saying like this burger is made of dead cow, right? Even though that's technically true. This is in the sexual politics of meat as well, but she talks about it as like the absent referent, right? That we like have other names for butchered animals to further push us away from the idea that like we have killed an animal to have it as food, to like dissociate us from the violence of that, I think. She has a chapter called Veggie Burger, where she talks about the origin of non-meat burgers, which really could be like another episode probably, but like basically as long as we have had, you know, meat burgers, we've also been like squishing vegetables into patties and eating them.
Yes.
So she talks about like croquettes as sort of like a proto-veggie burger. There is a chapter about like burger identity crisis. So after the mad cow disease outbreak back in the, I think 90s it was.
Oh, dang, yeah, mad cow.
So how like we as a culture have like a kind of identity crisis of like, well, we love hamburger, but hamburger bad for us? Hamburger make us really sick? And how we just continue to eat burgers anyway, right? And this has happened multiple times, right? People have presented thoughtful, well-reasoned arguments about like, well, there's mad cow, right? So maybe we should not eat hamburgers. And then people stop eating hamburgers for a little while, and then we go back to it. Or, like, climate change is really being worsened by cows, the production of livestock. We should really not eat burgers. And then people stop eating burgers for a little while, and then we eat burgers again, you know? And, like, why do we keep doing that? Why do we feel so strongly about this, like, one food? And then she also has a chapter called Woman Burger.
Woman Burger?
Yeah. And so she basically talks about, like, how we consume the female body in a lot of ways. You know, women are often described as, like, a piece of meat. I mean, she's, again, doing the thing of, like, paralleling feminism and vegetarianism. And so, I think that brings us to something that I personally need to talk about for this episode.
Oh.
Which is, I need to talk about the Hardee's girls.
Oh, my God.
I
know exactly what you're talking about.
Isn't that insane that I can just say the Hardee's girls and you know exactly what I mean?
I know exactly. I don't know if you have queued up the commercial that I'm thinking of.
Tell me the one that you are thinking of, because, dear listeners, I was telling Julia that I was a couple minutes late to our recording because I was feverishly trying to find, I had this one image burned in my head of this woman in front of a Jeep or like a large truck, and on the hood
she's, like,
of that,
on a car.
Yes.
She's on a car or something. Yeah.
And she is like in a bikini. She's like diving into this giant burger.
That's exactly the one I'm thinking of.
And for some reason, it, like, I don't know, maybe it's like too hot for TV or something, but I could not find it on YouTube. And I was like having a moment where I was like, did I hallucinate this whole thing? Like, is this not actually a commercial? Is this just like a false memory? But then I found it and I'm like, oh, okay, thank God. I'm not insane. I think we should add this to the category, at least for me, similar to the green M&M, of like commercials that I watched on TV as a young person who didn't know she was attracted to women and felt very confused and maybe very strange about what I was watching on TV, which is, as we described, conventionally attractive, thin white women eating giant hamburgers, taking specifically like a giant bite out of a really huge Hardee's Carl's Jr. hamburger in like a skimpy bikini. This is actually a whole genre of Hardee's marketing. It's not just one commercial. They have many commercials.
I think there's like one hot dog one that they had that like got banned in some places because it's like essentially like a blowjob visual but with a hot dog.
That sounds right.
I'm also like, did I fever dream this too? But no, I think that's actually a thing.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I had to find this like random ass USA Today website like article that like actually has, I think, the commercial that I'm thinking of. I still think there might be another one, but this is mostly what I was thinking of.
All right, I'll pull it up. I won't let your hard work go to waste. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is Hardee's marketing strategy, right? Like, this woman is clearly being objectified. She's clearly being portrayed as, like, a sex object. She is there for the male gaze. She's in, like, a tight outfit. I mean, it's got a very obvious, like, sexual connotation of, like...
Oh, yeah.
She is shoving a big thing into her mouth. And I think that this definitely has to do with the, like, meat equals man thing that we've been talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of, like, big burger is for manly man. I think that's also why this is supposed to be very attractive, right? You have this conventionally attractive woman that, I mean, I think it's implying that, like, she is sexually capable. She knows what to do in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And also with the burger.
It's just like a bunch of people were sitting around in a boardroom and they were like, what do men like? Texas. Big cars, Jeeps. You got Texas Jeeps, dirt, sexy hot ladies.
Yep.
Burgers. We got it. We're good. We're just gonna have a commercial with all that stuff in it.
I know that you, like, are joking and you're doing a bit, but I do actually have to read you a quote. This is quoted in Carol's book, Burger. This is a quote from Andrew Pudzer, the chief executive of CKE Restaurants, who owned Carl's Jr. and Hardee's, right, at the time of these ads. He said, quote, I like our ads. I like beautiful women eating burgers in bikinis. I think it's very American.
Ay, ay, ay.
He just said it, you know? I mean...
He just said it. It's just his fetish, and it just became the marketing scheme.
Yeah, Carl's Jr. has another ad that was the one that I kept finding when I was like, this is not the one I'm looking for. That was, I think it's like a Super Bowl ad that's like, what's more American than this? We have this all-American model, who of course is like some bombshell beautiful blonde with big boobs, eating a giant burger in the bed of a truck, wearing an American flag bikini. The truck is being driven by a champion bullfighter. The truck is on, it just like goes on and on of like, how can we make this the most American thing we possibly can?
But like, you know, romanticized stereotypical American.
Yeah.
But not like actually American.
Okay. And then I think lastly, you know, bringing us into the kind of present, not so distant future of hamburgers, I have 2 ads here from Impossible that I think we should watch. These are not too hot for YouTube, and they were very easy to find.
All right, I see what they're doing here.
So to describe briefly the ads that we have just watched, the first one is like, they're talking about this repeated refrain is like, we're solving the meat problem with more meat. The first commercial is just like a 15-second bit that's really going for the like, you know, you're seeing the burger sizzling on the grill, it's juicy, looks tasty, all of that. So it's appealing to your senses. And then they actually have like a man, a middle-aged white man, eats normal-ish sized burger, but it still looks juicy, tasty, there's lots of cheese. And the second one is one of those ads that I feel like you gotta watch it a couple of times. You need to watch it almost at half speed because it moves like so fast.
There's a lot that happens, yeah.
It's one of those ads where there's like a guy who's like talking to the audience, but he's like walking and talking. He's like, meat's got problems, but we can solve the meat problem with more meat from plants. And he's like
smacking burgers, ruining Joey Chestnut's hot dog eating competition.
Exactly, yeah. So, he shows up at like a hot dog eating contest, and he like pulls the tablecloth off and replaces it with Impossible hot dogs. And then the one that I really like is when he's in somebody's kitchen and he just like smacks the bowl of meatballs into the wall.
That made me laugh.
So the Impossible commercials that we just watched, they're very recent from I would say probably last year or two. As you may know, if you are on the internet or listen to, you know, major media news, you shouldn't. We are going through, some people would say, a masculinity crisis here in the U.S.
Oh no, a moral panic about the youth. Who could have foreseen this?
Tucker Carlson put out his documentary, quote unquote, a year or two ago called The End of Men, Deep Sigh. Basically, like, and this is a refrain that you hear a lot from these like conservative talking heads of like, they are very worried about the young men of today, especially with all of these transgender people and all of these non-binaries who don't use the he or she pronouns. What's happening to our men? Men are not allowed to be men anymore, is what I have heard. Men are becoming too feminine. There's like a demasculization that's happening. By the way, if you can't tell from the tone of my voice, I think this is all bullcrap.
Oh yeah. Let's just get it out there. Put the tiger on the table and yell at it. We disagree with this strongly.
Yeah. So, like, as a result of all this, like, hand-wringing of, like, what about the young men of today? There have been some, like, meat, virility, masculinity media that I would honestly say is, like, borderline propaganda that, like, reassures men that, like, meat is actually one way that they can still be a real man in today's modern world. So if you think about like the Liver King or the carnivore diet, again, Maintenance Phase is a really good episode. They have a couple of relevant episodes here, but they did one on like soy boys. So like, again, the sort of like feminization of like, if you don't eat meat, then you are emasculated.
Yeah, I love the incredible, like, we've talked about the societal and cultural push that happens, that permeates through today of like, meat equals man, not meat equals woman. And like, I love how they're taking it to the very, very extreme, where it's like, as a man doing the carnivore diet, the only thing you can eat is meat. Like to the most extreme it can go,
Yeah.
right? Like, to be a man, you must eat meat and nothing else but meat. You must be like the poor med student who was forced to eat White Castle sliders and nothing else. It's just meat and water and nothing else.
Which I think is why the Impossible ads that we watched are really interesting, because they are trying to do that, right? They're trying to reassure you, like, that you can still eat meat, aka be a man, but also be in line with, like, today's values, you know? You can still be, like, concerned about climate change, or, like, you know, you don't want to be associated with the, like, quote-unquote problems of meat from animals, so instead you can have meat from plants. It's a very, like, patriotic and, like, masculine commercial, even without it being, like, so over the top of, like, it's a pickup truck, you know, in front of the Statue of Liberty, any of that. I mean, the ad ends with, like, the guy riding off onto a motorcycle into the sunset.
It's so interesting because the ads from, like, opposite sides of the meat spectrum, I guess, are, like, the audience is still male for both, right? Like, the audience is still men for both. One is trying to sell masculinity in a very, like, objectifying, more toxic way of, like, woman piece of meat, woman hot hamburger food, whatever. Yeah. And then, like, and then Impossible Burgers commercials are also for the male audience, but in a different way of, it's like, you man, you eat meat, but meat could also be plant. Yeah. Still man. If meat, but plant meat, still man. Yeah. It's just like
the transitive properties, yeah.
The transitive properties. I just think it's so funny that both of these commercials are still, for hamburgers, are still targeted towards men.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just like,
hamburger for man, you know?
Hamburger for man. Even if not meat, still for man.
Yeah, I think also something that Impossible is trying really hard is, like, in the first ad, right, he's like, we can solve the meat problem with more meat, even though, like, meat traditionally is, like, animal, but in this sense, they're like, no, it's plant meat.
I bet there's some pearl clutching about the use of meat to refer to something that's not animal.
Yeah, probably so. Well, that's hamburgers.
That's hamburgers.
That is hamburgers. So,
I'm so hungry.
Yeah, I know. It's like your dinner time. It's probably like past your dinner time at this point. Yeah. Well, people at home, regardless of your gender, go eat a hamburger. Whether it's a veggie burger or a beef burger or
a chicken burger.
Whatever it is, go eat one. But don't put it on toast. Otherwise, Mr. Joel Ozersky will tell you it's not a burger.
Whatever burgers your ham.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying.
Now go out there and ham that burger, everybody.
Go out there and ham that burger. Thanks for lunching with us.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Our theme music is Red Onions by Louis Zong. Please check out the rest of his album Vegetable Soul in the description. You can follow us on Twitter at Girls Lunch. Nicole is also on Twitter at NicoleH262, and her website is NicoleHilton.com. Julia is smarter than all of us and not on social media. Thank you for listening.
Paris Hilton?